welcome back again to the Creating Compatibility series. I'm Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony. So today, what we're going to go over is specifically the moon, that character the moon represents in our charts. And we'll be discussing the freeze frame technique. And so that's both listed here. So over here, just as a reminder and if you didn't see the overview video, please do that. I go over everything in there. But what we'll be focusing on out of these 5 unconscious characters on the upper left here is the moon, which is the emotions, reactions, comfort level, etc. And we'll be examining them through all of the 4 elements: the earth, air, water, fire. Okay. And then we're going to show one of these HeartMath techniques. I mentioned HeartMath in the overview. Again, I would go back and see that if you haven't. It'll make a lot more sense. And we're going to be focusing on the freeze frame technique, which is very similar in terms of its usefulness as far as what the moon represents. So just a reminder, we're going to dive on into the unconscious. That's what the astrology does. It helps us uncover what is unconscious. And like Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and we'll call it fate. So astrology has nothing to do with fate, but it does have to do with getting at the unconscious, making that conscious. And just a reminder about the different planets and where we're focusing. So this whole series is just focused on these top 5 planets here, the personal planets and the lights. And today we are on the moon. And so just a quick review of the 4 elements: fire, air, earth, and water. And just so we're clear, fire includes the signs of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Earth includes Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. Air includes Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And then water, that's Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. So we're going to be looking at our moon, not our sun sign. So you don't know what your moon sign is just by your birthday. Anybody with any birthday can have any of the 12 moons. So it's just important to look at our chart, see where our moon lands. Okay, and so again, fire is kind of related to what the lion in the Wizard of Oz was apparently lacking. He lacked courage, he lacked that initiative, etc. Dorothy was depicted as needing to go home to find her grounding, her earth, her stability. The Tin Man was without a heart, the feelings. That's going to be a watery element. Okay, and then the Scarecrow was in search of a brain, in search of the mind, the intellect. That's what the air stands for. So we're going to see how our expression of the moon energy in our charts comes through in these 4 basic elements. Okay, just a reminder, here's my chart and the 5 characters that we're looking at. And today we are just focused on the moon. My moon, just as an example, that's in Virgos. That's an earthy sign. Okay, and so that's going to apply. But you can look at your chart, find your moon, that little crescent, and you figure out what sign that's in, and then the element goes along with what I just said in the previous slide there. So the moon, again, it's the unconscious emotional reactions and fears. It's essentially our first go-to when we're in a state of shock and fear. Something surprises us. How do we react? What's our initial reaction? Okay, and so some people, when they initially react, it's going to be a lot of flair. Some people, it's going to be almost no reaction. Okay, and we're going to see how these elements kind of play together. And the moon also has a lot to do with our sense of what makes us feel comfortable, what makes us feel at home. Okay, and it's a sense internally we have these perceived needs, things we think we need to be safe, and the moon has a lot to do with describing what our unconscious needs are on the inside. Okay, and so I got this spread over here. I got the fire symbol, the air symbol, earth, and water. So we're going to do with the moon, and this is a fun little exercise when we're you're live with an audience and you have different people sitting in groups. You can sit people in the groups, the fire moons, the earth moons, and the water moons, the air moons. And it's interesting. I use this water balloon analogy. So remember I said that the moon represents how we react, our initial reaction. So this is just an example of something that would surprise us. So if we were to hypothetically put group people by their moon signs, even though they don't know that's why they're grouped. They're just in 4 groups, different parts of the room, and just have them kind of sit there, right? And they're just kind of sitting there chatting. They don't know why they're in those groups, what's going to happen next. They're just kind of like waiting to get going. Well, what's going to happen is over in that fire moon group, while they're kind of, waiting and anticipating, they're going to kind of rile each other up a little bit. It's going to probably be the noisiest of the groups, because their emotional energy is a little bit fiery, okay? And so people with fire moons, that's again Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, there's a sense of anticipation that kind of breeds excitement, okay? That's so when it comes to comfort, there's fire moons really need to feel exciting a lot of the time. They like newness and excitement. That feeds them, that nourishes their needs in a lot of ways, okay? Over in the air group, that's going to be another chatty group, not as fiery and excited, but very chatty. People with air moons tend to feel with their heads. So they use their heads to kind of almost escape feeling in a certain way. And we all know people like this, or we might be people like this, where, you know, it's just easier and more light to have discussions. And so this group is gonna be very curious about each other and wanting to know, you know, where are you from? What do you do? What's your name? That's a very characteristic of a moon and an air sign. And that's going to be Aquarius, Gemini, Libra. Okay. And so it's a very friendly energy, emotionally speaking. And that's one of the needs that someone with moon and air has, is they need to interact with others. Okay. They need feedback. They need to communicate. Okay. Over in the earth moons, and this is again my group here, this would probably be the quietest group. I mean, there'd be some competition with the water group for quietness, but this is a group that's very emotionally very practical. Okay. And so sitting in a group of strangers, you don't know why you're in the group. Number one, that's going to be a red flag for discomfort right there. Why are we sitting here? Right. And so that would be kind of my experience, is like, all right, what's going on? You know, like, let's get a little explanation as to why we're in these groups, why am I in this group and not that group, and what are we doing here? What's next? What's coming up? Like, what are we preparing for? The earth moons really need to have things organized and practical and make sense. Okay, so it's hard for us to be sitting in a group without any explanation as to why. Okay, so there would be kind of, you know, there would be cordial and friendly, but it would get quiet quick. People, earth moons aren't as curious. We're kind of, you know, satisfied and like, okay, let's just get to the point here. Like, what are we doing? Right. And so they would kind of quiet down much quicker. Over in the water group, now here's a group that would be kind of similar to the air group, in that there would be a lot of, you know, interaction but the difference is, instead of being curious and asking lots of questions, it would be more of a heartfelt kind of feel for each other. You might even, after sitting there with for like, you know, 20 minutes with no explanation as to what's going on, they might feel like they've known each other for, you know, for eternity. There's a sense of connecting really quickly with water moons. Water moons are, you know, very easy to pick up on other people's emotions and feelings. And so there's a lot of compassion and a lot of, you know, ability to understand people on an emotional level. So they would get close really quick. That's kind of the thing with the water moons. They'll get close really quick. And they're not flamboyant and boisterous like the fire group. And there's more substance than with the air group, as far as that connection goes, not just an intellectual curiosity or a small talk kind of thing. Okay. And so they're all sitting here, and that's kind of like how those groups would be sitting in a row. And what would happen now if we introduce a surprise? And this is where the water balloon comes into play. So if we were to just toss a water balloon in the middle of each of these four groups and observe how they react to it, that really kind of describes what, you know, the reactive energy of these of this emotional element is. And so, for example, we'll start with the fire. So the fire group, again, they're boisterous, they're getting excitable, they love the anticipation of not knowing, and they're going to get surprised. They like that. Okay, but they get surprised with a water balloon. Now they're wet. Right now it's like, what? And so fire moons react strongly and quickly, and then they're over it. It's a very quick peak, and then it's done. And then even, you know, 2 days later, it's like it never happened. They're over it. They tend to process or burn through their feelings right away. So there's no lingeringness there. So they'll tend, you know, some of them might be really angry at the start. Others might be really upset. Others might just laugh and, you know, laugh out loud. That's hilarious. You know, what a great surprise, funny, haha. But there would be very strong reactions. Okay. And, but the point is, by the time I even finish going through the rest of them, they would be over it. Whatever that emotion was, they burned through it, they processed it, and they're done with it. So that's kind of a, you know, a really, I guess, a positive attribute of a fire moon, is the ability to process emotions and get through things quick. Okay. And then the air moon. So if we were to drop that balloon with the air group, remember they're all intellectually curious, they're asking questions, they're just thinking, thinking or feeling with their heads basically. And so there's a sense of detachment from the emotions, right? And so the way I envision, when we drop a balloon in the air signs is the number one, they might be difficult. Some of them probably won't even notice that the balloon hit for a minute because they're so engaged in their conversations, right? And then maybe someone says, "What happened? Did we just get hit?" And it's all questions. Why would someone throw a water balloon? And they're literally just curious as to what the answer is. Like, why would they do that? They're not even necessarily mad, they're not necessarily upset. They're just very curious about why it was done. And there's a sense of kind of being detached from the experience of getting wet by a water balloon when you weren't expecting it. They're kind of explaining it away and saying, well, where did it come from? What color was it? Was it big? Was it small? Did you get wet? Did we all get wet? That's the reaction, is to kind of talk about it. And so air moons have a tendency to talk about their feelings or their experiences rather than experience them. Okay, so there's that detachment. Okay, when we throw that balloon into the earth signs, the earth moons, like my group, this is the group that's kind of already over the small talk, and they're just kind of waiting, like just getting frustrated and maybe a little bit anxious because they're not sure why they're sitting there in the group. And so because of that, they're going to be paying attention. They'll see the balloon come in. So some of them will dodge out of the way of it, number one. And once it hits and breaks apart, people get wet. The practical reaction is, all right, let's go get a towel, wipe this up, pick up the pieces and throw the pieces away. And we'll sit back in our chairs and whatever that happened, it is what it is. Let's just do what we came here to do. Like, not realizing that was the exercise, that like, obviously you're not going to be put into a group of people just have a water balloon thrown at you, right? And so it just wouldn't even register. It would just be like, let's clean it up, let's do something about the mess, sit back in our chairs and wait for the program to begin. But what that has a tendency to do is bury those emotions, especially in the body. So people with earthy moons, like myself, have a tendency to have weird symptoms that show up later. Okay, so it's hard to even pinpoint something to an event or an experience or something like that. So that's kind of the positive side of an earth moon. Like, that's the kind of moon you want in an emergency, because that person is going to say, "Oh, your hand got cut off. All right, we got to get it. We got to get a tourniquet. We got to get your hand on ice. We got to call this because of this." You don't want someone with a fire moon in an emergency situation, because it might be, the right fire moon might react strongly and positively if well trained, but someone who's, like, say, not well trained in a medical triage situation, it might just scream and yell and cry, and that's gonna be very dramatic. You don't want that. You want practical in an emergency situation. So that's a positive side of that. But the negative side is, again, the not processing the emotions right away and hanging on to them, and having it become a different problem down the line because it wasn't processed in the moment. Okay, then we get to the water moons. Okay, the water moons, again, the most compassionate, and they're wishy-washy in terms of being able to feel each other's feelings very, very strongly. Okay, and so what happens here is that the balloon comes in. Okay, and again, some of them, because they're so deeply entrained in each other, might not notice it. Other ones will. But once they find out they've been hit with a balloon, the first thing that a water moon does is blame themselves. In other words, what did we do? What did we do that they threw that at us? Should we apologize, or are they going to apologize? And it's just right away into this, like, sense of, like, self-pity. They tend to take on guilt and responsibility, even if it isn't theirs. Okay, and so there's that sense of internalizing that experience as something that they brought on, like, for whatever reason. And so that's the thing with the water moons, is the positive side. This is going to be someone that's really going to care about your feelings, but they almost enjoy hanging on to grudges and old feelings. It's sort of like a safety net or safety blanket to have old feelings. Like, they're not interested in processing and letting things go. So that, similar to the earth moons, things can linger, but the difference is the earth moon is just avoiding it altogether The water moon is holding on to that experience, holding on to that trauma, because there's a sense of it being responsible for it. Okay, and water moons also they will tend to have, when it comes to our experience of being a child, and there's a stronger sense of connection to the mother figure or the experience of mother, and so there can be some extreme, either codependent relationships with the mother, or the opposite, which is estrangement, tends to happen either one of the two extremes, or sometimes a mix of both in the same life. So it's just something that water moons tend to have in common. Okay, and so that's, again, we went over fire, air, earth, and water. So that gives you a good basic overview of what we're going to get out of understanding our moon sign, and the element of that, and how it might differ from someone else, and coming to that conscious understanding that we are different, we're built differently. Energetically, we have different responses, and that none of these are wrong or right, but they're just the way that we tend to operate unconsciously. So if we can make that unconscious knowledge conscious, this can be very beneficial. The moon can really plays out more in a family situation than it does in a professional one. But in a professional situation where there's a close-knit group, that becomes like a family. And so this really does apply pretty strongly. So just remember, it's very important thing to learn to talk to people we disagree with. So understand those disagreements first. Right? Peace is not the absence of conflict, like I said in the overview. It is the balance of conflict. And so we want to understand what the conflict is so we can attempt to balance it. And if you remember from the HeartMath aspect of things, this concept of resilience, which is sort of like protecting ourselves against stress. We can't avoid stress in the same way we can't avoid conflict, but we can learn how to be more resilient in the face of stress. And so that is the purpose of the HeartMath, like that we went over. And this, again, just to remind you, this is what an incoherent sort of heart rate variability looks like, and this is what coherence looks like. And that is just referring to the connection between the heart and the brain, with the heart being the primary component of that team of heart and brain. Okay, and so the way we get this information, how are we going to know what the heart rate variability is? There are devices that you can get through HeartMath and whatnot. And so I have a device for my phone. I have one on my computer. So you can measure yourself before and after. And so, imagine having that kind of an exercise where you're understanding what your unconscious needs are via your moon element in your chart. We can kind of gauge ourselves before that exercise and after that exercise. And we can use a specific technique. Like I said, we're going to look at the freeze frame technique as one example of a HeartMath technique that can be used, but it's most relevant for this unconscious emotions, this moon sign, what that represents. Just to remind you, emotional energetics, our emotions and attitudes affect others positively or negatively, whether we're aware of it or not. So it's another thing we want to make sure that we are putting positive energy into the room. And when we are centered in sync, we create the more coherent field, and we're less affected. We're more sovereignly protected from other people's influence if we can establish our own field. And so that's very important. So here is the freeze frame technique, and I put the moon in there just because I feel like this is very much related to what the moon represents. Okay, and so it's a really simple exercise, and all HeartMath exercises involve what's known as heart-centered breathing, which is literally just breathing, consciously breathing in for about 5 seconds and then breathing out for 5 seconds. And then getting into that really helps bring that heart rate variability to a more coherent state. Okay, and so for this, remember, the moon has to do with our initial reaction. And so what we want to do is first acknowledge, okay, once we're in a reactive state, first take a minute, acknowledge, this is how I'm feeling right now. Okay. And once we acknowledge that and engage what it is we're feeling, that's when you bring in the heart focused breathing. And we would practice that for a period of time, whatever it is, 5-10 minutes. And from that place, once we get there, that's when we consciously put out that positive vibe, right? We put out that, what do you genuinely appreciate? give yourself a feeling of appreciation. So every person's different, so you don't have to pretend to appreciate something. You have to, authentically appreciate something in your life, something in your environment, and just focus on that. And that has a way of helping you to essentially redirect the energy, so that reaction is now being turning into a more positive experience, basically. And the fourth part there is to ask yourself, what other manner of reacting can I utilize? What is going to be more beneficial to me? No matter what happens here, what is a more beneficial way of reacting? So while staying in that state of positive energy, and asking yourself intellectually, what specific thing can I focus on to keep me in this state? Then from there, you observe yourself and act in accordance to that. And then, if we do kind of a before and after using that, the devices and whatnot, this is a really great way that when we're in a state of reaction, when we're in that realm of the moon, basically, that we can turn that reaction into something more positive and then affect the environment with that positivity, and then act from there. So it's a really simple idea, something that we can just do. If you're in your home or your office or whatever it is, these are techniques that really do work. And it's all about just recognizing that we are different. We're not, we can't expect everyone to be the same, react the same, or appreciate the same things. Okay. And so the freeze frame is a multi-purpose technique for stopping energy drains. And you can imagine how that would work if you're in a more positive state and you're more resilient. You're not going to be draining. Your energy won't be draining. You'll have more energy throughout the day. And it helps you gain clarity by accessing more of our intuitive intelligence. Okay. It's especially helpful when we have to make a quick decision or out of the box solution. So things we're uncomfortable with, right? Because that's what, the in the box solutions are what we're comfortable with. And the moon gets triggered, that moon energy in us gets triggered when we go out of our comfort zone. Okay. It's also good for shifting our physiology into that coherent state, which improves the mental functions and help us access even more intelligence. And so just that final reminder, everyone's here to learn something different. And that's why everyone does things differently. So it's important for those of us that have our moon and earth to recognize that moon and fire group, the way they're excited in that group, waiting for this, who knows what's going to happen in this exercise, to kind of we can show some appreciation for that. Like that can be a positive thing. What would that be like to feel like that in a situation like this, right? And then vice versa, others can kind of appreciate the practicality and the usefulness of someone with an earth moon, for example, or the benefits of the compassion you can get from someone in that water moon group, for example. Okay, so we all got something to bring and we all got something to learn. Okay, so again, take the best, leave the rest, hear everyone and follow no one. To be free, we must disagree. So that is kind of the mantra for this whole series, creating compatibility. So just understand that our freedom is in our ability to stand alone, and to just basically not have to be in agreement, not have to compromise, to be accepted and to accept others. Okay. And so that wraps up the moon compatibility combined with the freeze frame technique. So be sure to watch the other videos on Mercury, Venus, Mars, and the sun. And if you haven't seen that overview video, that'll really help you understand this video a lot more. So they're all going to be part of this creating compatibility playlist. So be sure to check that out. So again, Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony, and you can contact me through YouTube. Follow me on Facebook and Telegram. It's Sovereign Harmony Astrology. Go over a lot of things there. And if you're interested in setting up some kind of a workshop, whether it's online or in person, this is a really fun little tool, and I'd be happy to help out with that. So we will see you in the rest of the series here. Thanks for joining me here. Bye.